the 64th hexagram. Recognize that the head center is a pressure. And when you recognize that the head center is a pressure and not an awareness center, it is not the ajna, then this field of inspiration that comes from the head center can be seen for what it is. That is, it is a pressure, and if the pressure cannot be handled, it leads to problems. The gates of the head center are gates of potential madness. Collective madness in the 64 and the 63, and individual madness in the 61. In other words, to be as far away as possible from being grounded. Way up there in the lighthouse, with no idea of how cold the sea is. The 64th gate is a gate of confusion, and it is the inspiration of the abstract mental process. It is part of the right angle cross of consciousness. And both the collective head center gates, the 64 and the 63, are part of this cross of consciousness, along with the 35 and the 5. In this quarter of the wheel, in this quarter of duality, this is all about the confusion that arises out of the duality that is inherent in memory. The streams of awareness that are collective, the mental streams of awareness, are visual in their nature. The 17th gate is a gate of the right eye, and the 11th gate is the gate of the left eye, and that whole stream is a left eye process. It is a sequential process. The thing to recognize about the 64th gate is that because it's not aware, it's not an editor. It does not know how to piece the sequences together. It is simply the person that runs the film. It's not the person that puts the bits and pieces of film together into a coherent movie. And this is why there is confusion. The pressure is on the 47th gate to be an editor. That is, to be able to come to a point of realization about how the sequence fits in. And this is all about the past, and it's all about trying to make sense out of the past. Transition, like birth, requires determined strength for the passage through. The first line, the line of introspection, is called conditions. It says, in penetrating to the center, the understanding that instills the necessary harmony to survive disorder. Amongst the confusion, the difficulty in finding the point. What's the point of my remembering all that stuff that happened to me yesterday at the checkout counter? Why am I remembering that? Why am I thinking about that? What sense does it have? And of course, the 64th gate is not responsible for figuring that out. It's responsible for putting that out. And the first line is the ultimate foundation line for the abstract process. It is, what the hell's the point? And as long as there's no point, there is confusion. When people have the 64th gate, I always tell them that their confusion is for others. Isn't it nice to be collective? I mean, if you put your confusion on others, you share your confusion, they may be able to find the point for you. Maybe. Remember, collective gates are inherently social. One of the dilemmas for the 64, this is a dilemma that exists in human design, is that the 64 would like to be able to solve the point. It wants to be awareness. Every gate's looking to the other side. The 64 wants to be the 47. If you're living yourself, you're just a 64. It's not about what the dream means. It's about remembering the dream. And if you get to share that dream, somebody else may tell you what it means. If you share that dream, you may get to the point in metamorphosis where it can make sense to you. But that's not your job. Your job is to just get the dream out. Mars and detriment, the powerful temptation when having transition in sight to hasty action. That is, an urge to act when you think you've made sense out of the confusion. This is the great dilemma for the 64, to want to be the 47. It's the great dilemma of the 7 to want to be the 31, or the 21 to be the 45, or the 36 to be the 35, and so forth and so on. This is what conditioning is all about, is that we want to be what we're not. And this is where the madness is. The madness is not in the flow. It's in the attempt to make sense out of the flow. You got all this stuff pouring through you as a 64. Every time you try to resolve that, you bring yourself towards madness. Because the pressure cannot be the solution. In the White Book, an urge to act when you think you've made sense of the confusion. So much of consciousness is pressure. It's pressure. It is the pressure of events that will force an awareness process. It's the pressure that makes the mind work. It's its fuel. And because of that, these people can be deeply inspiring if they don't try to be the inspired at the same time. If they tell you their dream, if they share with you their experience without quantifying or qualifying it, the foundation is actually in being accurate in terms of the sequence you share. And of course, for other people, this is fuel, turning on their mental system. The second line, qualification. The second line does not know it's confused. I mean, think about how funny this is. The second line is walking around inside of its house and it doesn't know it's confused, and somebody knocks on the window to tell it that it is. What you're doing doesn't make any sense, dear. An inner development which recognizes what qualities are essential for transcendence and the awareness that without them action will fail. Inner development. You know, the second line. Leave me alone. Don't disturb me. Don't distract me. Because if you don't disturb me and you don't distract me, I don't know I'm confused. That's the first thing. And that they don't know they're confused is a perfect state for them, after all. Because they're not being concerned about what all that stuff means. It's the other that will be interested in that. You know, every second line has an anthropologist in its life. You know, studying their behavior through the lit window. Isn't it interesting what they do? I wonder how they survive that way. It looks so confusing. The moon in detriment. Constantly in action, it wastes the very qualities and resources that it will need. That is, getting lost in the confusion and burdening the psyche. The moment, all of this, remember, this is inner development. All of this is lower trigram. This is an inward process. And here it becomes so difficult to be able to just accept your design, that you're not here to make sense out of your inspiration. What you can do is learn to recognize who really can make sense out of it. Remember that what you're not is where you can be wise. The 64 can always learn in a lifetime to be clear about which 47 really releases that pressure, that makes sense out of the inspiration. Not by being conditioned by it, by being lost in it. Not by wanting to be what one is not. I meet so many 64s who want to make sense out of things. Give me a break. They're here simply to share the past. They make great witnesses. They make great witnesses because they're not here to qualify or quantify what they witness. They're just here to share it. Third line. It is exceedingly difficult for the third line in this position to be comfortable. No greater enemy to the sanctity of the human life than mental gates. They can be terrible enemies. This is about coming to understand that what we see in human design through definition and type and ultimately through authority is that we see that the mental system has no inner authority. It does not have within it the authority to make a decision for us in our lives, our own lives. The mind has only outer authority. Only outer authority. You know, my joke, my mind's great for you, horrible for me. And it's still true, and always will be true. And I can never succumb to my mind wanting to be the corporal that wants to be dictator, because my life will go back to its chaos. So it's very important to understand that unless you can be clear that your mind doesn't have inner authority in your process, every activation in the mind is going to be disturbing to you. Your mind becomes your enemy, and if you have the 64 or the 61 or the 63, you can be tormented by that pressure. Overextension. Saturn exalted. The wisdom to recognize when one has not the necessary resources to complete transition. Such timely awareness may give it a chance to seek assistance. This is the third line, tough as it may be, being able to learn from banging into the other side that it can't make sense out of it. That's the magic for the 64. That's its point of transition to the harmony, to the resonance, to come to wisdom. The wisdom to accept confusion is a temporary state that will be resolved in time through others. Wow, what a lesson for the third line to learn. And a great collective lesson. Everything in its time through others. You see, wherever we go, we meet timing. And that timing is not something you have to learn. Timing is something that you are. And you have the right timing when you're living out your nature. The moon in detriment. The risk of a superficially confident personality that when transition collapses there is no one to turn to. Overconfidence that the fates will be kind on demand. In other words, that whoever you meet is going to be able to solve your problem. That whoever you meet, you're going to be inspiring to. That whoever you meet can make sense out of your confusion and help you. The most important thing is that here in this third line, it learns very, very quickly the need for the social collective process. It needs it. Both the 64 and the 63, they feed the collective interdependency. They insist on it. All collective channels are social, and as such, when you reach the upper trigram and the transpersonal possibilities, that this capacity to share the confusion with others becomes something that works more consistently. The lower trigram does not know that the 47 is at the other end of the channel, waiting, designed to try to realize out of that inspiration, and needs that inspiration as fuel. Doesn't know that. And so it doesn't understand that mechanism with the other, and it doesn't have the gift of beginning the process of recognizing which of the other can be of value. That's why the third line here is rooted in fate. It's not like they think they understand the other at all, or that they can figure out which of the other can help them. It's just, the gods are going to help me. They're bound to help me. Because they don't really know the other. When you get to the fourth line, when you get to this line of opportunism, of friendship, this fourth line then has an opportunity to be able to externalize that confusion. That can be very uncomfortable when you meet them, eh? Not everybody is designed to be inspired by somebody's abstract confusion about the past. And not everybody is interested in listening to somebody build their friendship with you on telling you stories about what happened yesterday. They make great gossips, by the way. Conviction, symbolized by its phases. The moon is assured of transition, convinced by its very process that it will triumph. And its very process is its collective gift of being able to make friends with the other side. It's secure that way. In the friendship is the hope, it's abstract, is the hope that things can begin to make sense for it. And its process, the fact that it's related to the movement of the moon, is that it will take time to make the right kinds of friends. But the moment that the friendship is there, that's the moment that the fourth line will externalize its need to have sense made out of its inspiration. It will constantly be talking about what's going through its mind, bouncing it off of their friend, hoping to find sense in all of that. If you bounce it off the wrong friend, it has quite an impact. Remember, the fourth line brings kindness or meanness. In the last 7 minutes and 30 seconds of the fourth line, we have a transition in the cross, and the design, personality, and sun change from the 35-5 to the 45-26. So here we have the 64-63 with the 45-26. And this is called the juxtaposition cross of confusion. These people are deeply inspiring and very lost. They are always in the past. They're always in the past. That does not mean they cannot survive in the present. It just means that their present is filled with the past, and it's filled with seeking guidance. They're always looking for the other, to be able to make sense for them, and that they are never liberated from that sense of confusion in their process. In the 1960s, early 1960s, there's a generation that was born that has the 6447 and the 63-4. And I have met literally hundreds of these people. And they have an ongoing process of dealing with collective madness. The moment that you do not understand how that mechanism works, the moment you cannot surrender to the fact that your mind has no inner authority, it does terrible damage to the psyche. It leads to a life of just plain confusion. You can see that at the beginning of the collective process is the essential need to share. Otherwise, the whole process doesn't even begin properly. And that the ability to come to a point of making sense out of things and eventually being able to express them is a collective process. There's nothing new under the sun. That's true for everything that is collective. It is what is there and what can work amongst the collective. The left angle cross. This is the left angle cross of dominion. You will notice that the 2645 are actually aspects of the cross of rulership in a right angle. Here in the left angle, they're part of the left angle cross of dominion. The 64, 63, 45, 26. This is when inspiration tries to take control. This is when inspiration tries to overwhelm. And of course, because the inspiration is not clear, whether that's abstract as confusion or logical as doubt, it leads to disorder. The fifth line, promise. The values promised in any new order are demonstrated through harmonic interactions with others. This strengthens the justification for the struggle. That's the Venus exalted. It says confusion over which values and relationships can bring harmony. And of course, the strategy of the fifth line is that they are the ones that it's projected on them that they can be inspiring, or it's projected on them that they are confused. It's no wonder that heretics were locked up in madhouses or carved up and killed. Fifth line, heretic. That power to inspire others that has no real sense to it, but it just inspires them, can be very, very frightening to the collective and have dominion over them. You know, this banana that got all these people to cut their balls off and kill themselves so that they could catch a spaceship behind the comet. You know, the power of inspiration to blind. It's a fuel after all, and it's a pressure. And it can be so exhilarating that nothing is necessary. No sense, no formula, nothing. Everything about this 64 is about people. The 64 and the 63 are deeply, deeply involved with understanding the other, because the other is necessary. That the burden of inspiration must be passed on. And it has to be passed on to the right forces. Jupiter in detriment, a tendency in trying to justify the struggle by focusing exclusively on the failure of the old order that cannot demonstrate the quality of the new. That is, focusing on the past confusions about values and relationships. Unless you can really make sense as the other for the 64, they get stuck and they stay there in their process, constantly going back to that place and having that place constantly reappear for them. These are people that have reoccurring dreams. You know, they keep on having the same dream over and over again for periods of time in their life. Or they have dreams where they constantly go into the same room in various dreams throughout their life. The 64th gate is the most powerful of all dreaming gates. And it means that we have a greater dream potential to connect to the past than we do to the future. In terms of the past or the future, those are things that I speak of mechanically and things that only can exist if nothing new comes. Think about that. That is, the collective is about time, past, and future. But it does not include or consider the individual, which is mutation. You're able to dream of a future. You're able to dream of a future, but you cannot ever know what the mutative potential is. So yes, we can mechanically make contact with what's coming, I do rave returns, and what's past, but it does not mean that we can be absolutely accurate or sure about any of it because we don't know the mutative potential. We know what we can be at a given moment, but we don't know what the rest of the world can be at that moment. The key for the 64-5 is that, like all fives, it has to be able to provide a practical confusion. Does that sound confusing? That is a confusion that can be made sense out of practically. That's very important. That is their gift. Not to offer the practical solution, but to offer an inspiration that has practical application. And again, only in times of crisis, only in times when it's necessary. Otherwise, they're better off being off on their little farm. The 6th line. There is a strange thing that takes place in the 6th line of the 64 and the 63. Basically, they want to be each other. You know, they got a problem. The 64-6 would love to be logical. I mean, it would just love it. It sits up there with all that confusion and says, gee, I wish there was a logical way to make sense out of all this. And the 63 with its doubts, I can't come up to the formula. Maybe somebody's got an idea. Wants to be abstract. The grass is always greener on the other side, whether you're logical or abstract. Victory. The mental assuredness that knew that victory was inevitable, thus making triumph sweet, but not a reason for excess. The mental gift of enjoying the confusion and its diversity of data. You know, look, these people spend the first part of their life trying to make sense out of their confusion themselves, to discover they can't, trying to get others to resolve their confusion, to find out that they can't, and then they go up on the hill and say, I'm confused and I love it. You know? Let me be an inspiration to you. I don't know how anything works, but I can turn you on to a zillion things. It can be very beautiful. To enjoy the confusion. This is one, you know, the 64th gate is part of the experiential way of being human. To enjoy being yourself. Some character in this movie last night said it was a sign of great sin to love yourself. And I found that hysterical. mean, it was hysterical. It's such a joy to recognize that when you are yourself, those attributes of your nature that disturb you now, you get to see that they're such important allies for your completion as a being. I learned that so deeply in my life with the 48th gate. You know, I have this gate of depth, and I don't know what's going on because it's covered by 2 Neptunes. And I don't have the 16th gate at the other end. I spent so much time in my life chasing skills, chasing after the holy grail of the 16, assuming that if I got the right skill, I could get my depth out. Like the 64 trying to make sense out of its own inspiration. And it was nothing but frustration for me. Oh yeah, I did learn a lot of skills, that's true. But it still didn't do me any good. When I got to the point in my process, you know, where I met the voice, I met this knowledge, it's the moment I stopped looking for skills. I mean, I just stopped. And what happened to me was that the skills came to me. You know, the ones that had the skills came to me for my depth, and I got to see my depth manifest. And it's perfect. So I didn't need to learn any of those skills. All I had to do was wait for the skillful ones to recognize my depth. And for me to be clear which one of the skillful ones is right for my depth. You know, to be aware of your design is to enjoy what you are. To enjoy your limitation. We all have limitations. It's there to enjoy your limitation. To revel in it. There's nothing like you. And to revel in that and to understand the magic of the cosmos is that there's someone on the geometry line that's going to pull up to your gate and is going to say, hey, you got that, I need it. And I got this and you'll love it. If you just wait. This enjoyment of the diversity. Think about how valued these people are. They say, you say to them, I'm so confused, and they say, yes, this is life. I mean, that's what they say. Yes, this is life. Life is confusing. Yes, it's true. And you don't have to expect that you're going to have to be responsible for eliminating that confusion. Because if you do that, you're going to go nuts. Just enjoy being confused. Enjoy being an inspiration. Remember that confusion is a necessary stage before order can take place. We learn this in the 3rd gate of mutation. Confusion is necessary before order can take place. So that this state of being inspiring but not being clear is a perfect state. Because the clarity comes out of communion with the other. And thus the collective knowledge, the shared knowledge. The detriment, Venus. Like the story of the Trojan horse, it can be dangerous to get carried away in celebration, lest one loses vigilance and perspective. With all the data, it's easy to lose perspective. You know, if you're collecting all of this confusion, it's hard to tell what of anything is worth anything. And it's true. Whenever you meet a 64 and you scratch them deep enough, they're yearning for logic. The wheel is very, very kind to them. Very kind to them. Because at the end of the 64 process, you move into the 47. And that's very nice. You know, instant gratification, go from confusion to making sense. It's one of those transits, by the way, that's very interesting to watch, technically. Watch the moon go through or watch inner planets move through. And don't watch yourself. Watch everybody else in your life around you. So on the 64 day, you can see they're confused as hell. And then you watch them go through all of that pain. It's conditioned, so they really go through it. And then the next day or the day after, the 47 comes, and all of a sudden they make sense out of it, and they release all that pressure. Of course, the fact that it's conditioned means that what they've made sense out of may have no value for them whatsoever, but that's another story. In the wheel, as we move, we're going to go from this pressure, this inspiration, and we're going to step into the beginning of the process of making sense out of it. The key in all of this is really to recognize that if you don't live out your nature, you really suffer. If you don't understand the mechanics of how you operate, your life is going to be full of unnecessary pain. It just will be. And at the moment that you can accept the way in which you operate, you can accept that there are certain things in your life that are not meant to be resolved, not meant to be acted on, not meant to be enjoyed, not meant to be done, and so what? All the conditioners say the same thing. You missed it. You missed something. You should have been there last night. You should have done that. You should have read this book. You'll miss something if you don't. These are the conditioners. You missed nothing. There's nothing to miss. When you live out your nature, you get exactly what's for you. And all that stuff you think you're missing, that's the stuff that brings you so much trouble in your life.